It's July 21st. Welcome to YesToHellWith.com. Yesterday I asked a simple question. What is the job of the sheriff? Not what the state tells him, not what the academy teaches him, not what has become normal. What is the actual constitutional purpose of the office? Most people immediately answer to enforce the law, but that answer is incomplete. The constitutional sheriff is not merely an enforcer. He is the constitutional guardian standing between the people and government itself. His oath is not to protect regulations. His oath is not to protect bureaucracy. His oath is not to protect revenue. His oath is to support and defend the Constitution. And that changes everything. Let me give you two simple examples. Imagine a widow living out in the country. She has a small apple tree in her backyard, and every autumn she gathers the apples and places 5 of them into little paper bags and sets up an old folding table beside the road. And she tapes a piece of cardboard to the front of it and says, 5 apples, $2. She's not a corporation. She's not running a supermarket. No, she's not poisoning anybody either. She's simply selling apples that she grew on her own property. She wants to pay the electric bill. And along comes the county. An inspector tells her that she needs a permit to place the table beside the road. Another official tells her she needs a business license. And then the health department arrives. Oh no! Now she's being fined because she hasn't complied with food regulations. Ask yourself something. What has she actually done wrong? Whose life has she harmed? Whose liberty has she violated? Whose property has she damaged? If the answer is no, then what exactly is government protecting? Or is it protecting the administrative process itself? Now let's change the story. 2 little children, 8 and 10 years old, are on summer vacation. They build a tiny lemonade stand from scrap wood and cardboard. A handwritten sign says, "Lemonade, 25 cents. They're learning responsibility, work, customer service, confidence. And then a city official walks up. She says, "Where's your permit?" The children don't know what a permit is. "Where's your food service approval?" They've never heard of that either. The person says, "You're violating city ordinance." The stand is shut down, the lemonade is dumped out, and the children go home crying. Now ask yourself another question. What lesson did those children just learn? Did they learn entrepreneurship, or did they learn that government permission comes before personal initiative? That is a tragic lesson. Now let's introduce the constitutional sheriff. The sheriff arrives not to take sides emotionally, but to ask questions that matter. He asks, what right has this person violated? What immediate injury has occurred? What constitutional authority justifies depriving this peaceful woman of the ability to sell apples she grew herself? What constitutional authority justifies shutting down the lemonade stand belonging to 2 small children? These are not political questions. They are constitutional questions, and they deserve constitutional answers. If no injury exists, if no person's life, liberty, or property has been harmed, then the sheriff must ask whether the exercise of government power has exceeded its proper constitutional limits. That is what discernment looks like. Notice something. The sheriff isn't refusing to listen. He isn't refusing to investigate. He isn't refusing to uphold legitimate law. He's doing something much more important. He's distinguishing between protecting the public and simply protecting administrative procedure. Those are not the same thing. This is where many sheriffs fail, not because they are bad people, but because they are trained to begin with the regulation instead of beginning with freedom and natural rights. The constitutional sheriff begins somewhere else. He begins with the citizen. He begins with the question, what freedom is government about to deprive? Only then does he ask, is that deprivation constitutionally justified? That is the order, not the other way around. If sheriffs throughout America began asking those questions consistently, thousands of unnecessary conflicts would disappear overnight, because government would once again be required to justify its exercise of power instead of merely assuming it. That is the difference between administration and constitutional government. Administration begins with compliance. The Constitution begins with freedom. Administration asks, did you get permission? The Constitution asks, by what authority are you taking away a peaceful person's freedom and natural rights? Those are two entirely different systems of thought. The sheriff who understands that distinction becomes something far greater than a law enforcement officer. He becomes the last constitutional checkpoint before government crosses the line. And if he no longer understands that responsibility, who is left to defend the people? That is the question every sheriff in America should ask before putting on the badge, because his oath was never simply to enforce. His oath was to preserve constitutional constraints so that the people could remain free. One final thought, and this is important. If, while listening to this discussion, you found yourself saying, but those regulations and ordinance exist for the greater good, then perhaps you've never fully understood the true nature of freedom, natural rights, and limited constitutional government. A free people do not begin by asking what government should control for society's benefit. They begin by asking what government has the constitutional authority to control at all. That distinction is the foundation of freedom. Once it is forgotten, freedom slowly becomes permission, rights become privileges, and citizens become participants in an administrative system they no longer question. If that distinction has never occurred to you, then you may have never truly understood the meaning of natural rights or constitutional constraints. And unless you're willing to question that assumption, you probably never will. And as always, may truth reign supreme.